Just a reminder, please move to the front. Brothers on that side, please, you guys can move to the front. Sisters, move to the front. You know that this side of the lecture hall is for brothers, this side is for sisters. So if you guys can move to the front, so we have space for people as they file in. The after lunch crowd tends to file in a little bit later, so we want to make space for people as they come in, inshallah. So we will be starting the main session number 4 right now, the prophetic prescription, and we'll start off with the Quranic recitation by Brother Abdul from Brentwood Masjid.
So, relevant to the topic, there were a few questions that were asked of Abbas radiallahu anhu. The people came up to him and they asked him, we have problems having children. He told them, go make istighfar. Go ask Allah for forgiveness. They came to him and told him, we're having problems with our crops, there's no rain. He said, go make istighfar. Go ask Allah for forgiveness. They came to him and told him, we have financial problems. He said, go make istighfar. Go ask Allah for forgiveness. And they told him, how are you telling us the same prescription for all of these things? He said, do not read these verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, where Nuh alayhi salam, Noah, peace be upon him, was pleading to his people to make istighfar and telling them about the benefits. And these are the verses that we'll be reciting.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فقلت استغفروا ربكم إنه كان غفارا يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا ويمددكم بأموال وبنين ويجعل لكم جنات ويجعل لكم أنهارا ما لكم لا ترجون لله وقارا وقد خلقكم أطوارا ألم تروا كيف خلق الله 7 سماوات طباقا وجعل القمر فيهن نورا وجعل الشمس سراجا والله أنبتكم من الأرض نباتا ثم يعيدكم فيها ويخرجكم إخراجا والله جعل لكم الأرض بساطا لتسلكوا منها سبلا فجاجا قال نوح رب إنهم عصوني واتبعوا من لم يزده ماله وولده إلا خسارا ومكروا مكرا كبارا.
When Nuh alayhi salam was pleading to his people, he said, and I was pleading with them, I was saying, he's speaking to Allah. He said, I was pleading with them saying, ask forgiveness from your Lord. He is oft forgiving. He will send rain to you in abundance. He will increase your wealth and your sons, and bestow upon you gardens, and bestow upon you rivers. What is the matter with you, that you place not hope for kindness and long suffering in Allah, seeing that it is that He that created you in diverse stages? Do you not see how Allah has created the 7 heavens one above another, and made the moon a light in their midst, and made the sun as a glorious lamp? And Allah has produced you from the earth, growing gradually, and in the end He will return you into the earth and raise you forth again. And Allah has made the earth for you as a carpet, that you may go about therein in spacious robes. Noah said, O my Lord, they have disobeyed me, and they insist to follow those whose wealth and children give them no increase, but only loss, and they have devised a tremendous plot. Jazakumullah khair.
So since it's after lunch, a lot of folks tend to be in the little bit of post-lunch like coma. So let's break out of that a little bit. This entire weekend is really focused on building brotherhood and sisterhood and ummahhood. And so a lot of these speakers have been talking about that. And MSA West Conference has for years been a unique space where people can get to know one another. So for the next 2 minutes, inshallah, we're going to do a quick little activity where everyone introduce yourself to the person in front of you and the person behind you. If you're in the front row, introduce yourself to the the people next to you. Just ask them your name and where they go to school, inshallah. So 2 minutes.
All of us.
Whenever you come to my campus, just stare at my second. For those of you who are entering, please take a seat. We're going to be starting the session right now. All right. Can I get everyone's attention, please, again? If you are... All right, everyone, can we get everyone's attention, please? Please take a seat. We're starting right now. So, with that energizer, we're going to jump into the first main session 4, the prophetic prescription, with Ustadha Amirebrahmi and Ustadha Mujahid. So, Ustadha Amirebrahmi received her master's in education from UCLA, where she researched focused on effective mentorship rooted in critical race theory in urban high school students of color. She holds a bachelor in child and adolescent development from San Jose State University, where she served as the president of the Muslim Student Association for 2 consecutive years. Currently, she is pursuing a second bachelor's degree in Islamic studies through Al-Azhar University. Maryam spent and memorized the Quran in Cairo, Egypt for years. She has been presented the Student of the Year award by the former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, holds a second degree in Black Belt in Taekwondo, and she travels to work with different communities on topics related to spiritual connections, identity, social issues, and women's studies. She's also soon to be a mother, inshallah. So with that, please let's welcome Ustadha Amirebrahmi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Assalamu alaikum. So in our communities, we often go through things that we might feel uncomfortable sharing with other people. There are so many of us who've gone through maybe depression, maybe know somebody who's cut themselves or who's tried to commit suicide. It's very normal in our community to have doubts of faith, whether or not God actually exists, wondering if Islam is actually the truth. Maybe some of you have dealt with addictions. There are many of members in our community who deal with drinking addictions, porn addictions, masturbation addictions. There's so much that happens in our community that sometimes isn't discussed. Relationships with parents, the relationships that we get into that we shouldn't be in. What do we do in those situations? And in every single one of these where we're questioning what we're supposed to do and we're not sure how we're supposed to act, or we maybe do something and then we regret it and we don't really know where to go from there, The problem is when you go into a Muslim space, sometimes there's complete silence about the things you're actually going through. So like raise your hand if you know someone or you've been through something, and then as you're going through that thing, you go to the masjid and they're like, a good Muslim is this righteous believer who prays all the time, who never makes mistakes, and they go to Jannah. Yeah, have you heard that kind of message? And that is a very beautiful message in a way, but at the same time, it's very alienating, because what it's saying is, when you struggle with something, there's no place for that discussion in the house of God. And the message that sends sometimes is, if I'm going through something that I'm struggling with, and I don't know who to turn to, the one who won't understand is God himself. When we make it taboo to talk about issues that we're going through, the message that sends is, you're not Muslim enough when you make a mistake or when you're struggling with something. The problem, though, is that the number one being who can understand, who wants to be there for you, who is that safe space when there is no other safe space, is God himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to be our refuge. He wants to be the one that we turn to, especially when we're going through difficult times. So when we get this message of there's no space to talk about what you're going through, that might be a human message, but that's not the message from God. The message from God is, especially when you're going through something difficult, I am here for you. And one of the ways that we can connect with him and have that space where we find safety in him is through connecting to him with our hearts. In the Quran, Allah talks about a concept of qalb salim. How many of you have heard a pure heart before, quote unquote? Okay, when you hear the term pure heart, what do you think of? What are terms that come to your mind? Just yell them out. Good intentions? What'd you say? I can't hear you. Clean, perfect. Innocent? All right, what else? Tawbah. Tawbah, right. Just like coming back to God, repenting. Give me a couple more. Okay. Sorry. Muhsin. So someone who's like excellent in everything that they do. Over here. Piety. One more. Did you say naive? Yeah. Okay, explain that. Okay, that was an excellent attempt to explain it. Maybe it'll make sense, maybe your explanation will totally make sense with what the professors or the scholars of explanations of the Quran say about this verse. When we hear this verse, these two verses in the Quran, Allah says on that day, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. On that day, there's no benefit to how many kids you've had, how much love you've had, how many followers you have on Instagram, how many snaps you've put out. All of those things don't matter. What matters is coming to God with this qalbin salim. So it's translated as pure heart, usually. And the words that we heard were things of like purity, excellence, having good intentions, maybe naive in the sense of you're naive of the world, and so you're like focused on God only. Not that that's naive, but the point is that focusing completely on you are pure, and so you have a pure heart. But the scholars talking about this verse actually split it up into two things. The first thing is that an individual who has a pure heart is somebody who believes in God firmly, who doesn't have a doubt of his existence, who doesn't worship other than him, and who believes in the hereafter. So if you believe in the hereafter, and you believe in God, and you don't worship other than God, you already have part of qalbin salim. If you count yourself as someone who believes in God, who believes in the hereafter, you're already part of this verse, inshallah. Now, sometimes we might have a doubt in faith, right? We're like, oh man, I have these thoughts about God. I don't really know what to think about them. I'm not really sure if they're true. How many of you know someone who's had that experience before? I definitely have. Very normal. When we have that experience, sometimes the way we feel is like, okay, if I'm having these thoughts about Allah, like I can't even say them out loud sometimes. A group of people came to the Prophet ﷺ, this is Sahih Muslim, in the book of Iman. And they said to him, we have these thoughts, these like insane thoughts, we can't even say them out loud. And the Prophet ﷺ was like, for real, you have thoughts like that? These are thoughts about Allah. And they're like, we have thoughts like that. He's like, that's clear faith. The fact that you're worried about the thoughts you have is a sign of your faith. Now, if you really have questions and you have complete doubts, it's okay. It's a time to ask someone that you feel comfortable with. Find someone who you can trust to ask those questions. But the second thing is sometimes our hearts just need some affirmation. Ibrahim alayhi salam, prophet of God, friend of God. He has done so many miracles. He was in the fire and God made it cool. And yet, even with all of that, like none of us have been, thank God, in fire that has been turned cool, inshallah never. But the point is, he saw miracle after miracle in his own lifetime, and he still asked Allah, show me how you raise the dead. And Allah's like, Allah don't you believe? And of course Allah knows that he believes. And Ibrahim was like, no, I do believe, of course, but like, I want my heart to be firm on this belief. So there are times like I might wake up and I'm like, dude, is there really a hereafter? Is there really a God? Is this for real? And then I think about the things that are going to keep my heart firm in strong belief. That is exactly this concept of, I believe in God. Sometimes I might waver, but I try to get back there. So the point is, if you already have this, inshallah, you already have Qalbin Salim for the first part. The second part is character. So the scholars say about these two verses, this Qalbin Salim, that there's no one who doesn't commit sin. This isn't referring to somebody who is sinless. Imam Arabi, Imam Baghawi, the Tafsir al-Qurtubi, the Tafsir al-Tabari, over and over and over, in all of these tafsir, what they say is that if you sin, you still have Qalbin Salim. It's normal to sin. The issue is what you do with that, right? Like, how do I work on that? Character is the concept that's addressed with the second part of Qalbin Salim. Not having hatred towards somebody, not feeling arrogant, not wanting to, do things over someone else just for the sake of jealousy or rivalry. All of those things are part of the second concept of Qalbin Salim. So the first part entails of our faith, the second part entails of having good character. Now, when we're in a situation where we want to have a safe space, what we want to focus on, safe space with Allah, what we want to focus on is how do we make our hearts have good character with Allah? How can I connect my heart to Him? Sometimes I feel alone, I feel numb, I feel devastated. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to care. How do I still feel like He's going to be there for me, and I care about Him being there for me when I'm going through all these things? We're going to talk about a 47-step plan, inshallah, today. I'm just kidding. We're just like, oh my God, I gotta leave right now. We're going to talk about 3 tools, inshallah, of how we can actually come to Allah having this Qalbin Salim. The first one is the Quran. So I'm going to tell you a personal story. The Quran for me is really what changed my life. I didn't really believe in God. I wasn't sure if He was, if He existed. If He did exist, is Islam really the truth? And I started reading the Quran in the translation. And, sometimes you're going through crazy things, right? Have you ever been through something insane, and then you open the Quran and you put your finger there, and there's like a verse that has to do with what you're going through? Raise your hand if that's ever happened to you. SubhanAllah, right? It's like, oh my God, like God for real knows I exist. Like for real, He's watching me. So there were these things that would happen in my life, and I felt so alone, like no one understood. One time when I was in high school, a bunch of people started spreading a rumor about me. The rumor wasn't true. They were spreading it throughout the school. And I couldn't believe that people would just make something up about me and then tell a bunch of other people. My friends didn't understand because they were part of the rumor. And some of them. And nobody really understood where I was coming from. So I went home and I'm crying so hard. And I'm like, oh my God, how can people say this messed up stuff? And then I opened up, I'm like, oh, and I open the Musaf with my eyes closed, and I point my finger on the verse. And the verse is the Surah An-Nur, those who slander believing women. And the verse had to do with exactly what they were slandering me on. And I was so shocked that no one in person understood what I was going through, but it was like suddenly I could find comfort, I could find refuge in the one who truly understood my situation. And over in my life, I found situations where I would go to the Quran, and in English, because I didn't speak Arabic at that time, I'm not Arab, I learned Arabic later after that. But I would read them in English, and over, I found verses that spoke to my heart. And I found so much comfort in them. And that comfort allowed me to start healing and to start looking at God and this relationship I want to have with God in a completely different way. He tells us in the Quran, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you are in His knowledge. He says to Musa and Harun alayhim as-salam, they're about to face Pharaoh, right? Like imagine this huge tyrant who calls himself God. And they're afraid. And Allah says, don't be afraid. I am with you, hearing and seeing. So all of those times where you're going through something and you don't know who to turn to, where is your safe space? Who is your safe space with? Who are you going to call? There you go, you got it. MashaAllah. Who are you going to call? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who can provide that type of comfort for you, who will not judge you, who understands what you're going through, even when what you're going through is messed up. But He will still be there, and He wants us to turn to Him no matter what. So the first place in finding this connection with Allah through our hearts is through this connection with the Quran. Now, of course, there are so many different ways you can come to Allah. Some people love fasting, charity, doing pro bono work if you're a lawyer, getting into politics so you can serve the community. There are so many ways that we can use as tools to get close to Allah. For me, the Quran was one of the most important to grab my heart and to start looking at Him as not this extended enemy who I didn't understand, but someone who loved me and who I could connect with. And that concept of helping me find that connection is something that sometimes we need when we're going through a particularly painful time. There was a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. He walked into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, he's like overwhelmed. He's overwhelmed with his sins, he's overwhelmed with everything that's going on in his life. Have you ever felt like that? Just like completely, utterly alone? Who do you turn to? Who do you talk to? Your parents are supposed to understand, but maybe they're the ones you have issues with. Your friends don't really get it, you can't tell them. So he walks into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ sees him. So he sees that he's in this incredibly difficult state. And he teaches him the second tool. So the first was Quran. He teaches him the second tool of how to come to God with this heart. And that is dua and istighfar. So making dua and asking for God's forgiveness. So he tells the man to sit down, and he teaches him the following. Allahumma maghfirutaka awsa'a min dhunubi. Oh Allah, your forgiveness is greater than my sins. Wa rahmatuka arja 'indi min 'amali. And your mercy is more hopeful to me than my own deeds. So no matter what I do that's messed up or that's good, your mercy upon me, your forgiveness is greater than all of that. The Prophet ﷺ told him to say this once, then he told him to say it again, then he told him to say it the third time. And after he said it the third time, the Prophet ﷺ told him to stand up, he's been forgiven. Now, I want you to think about the times where you've made like a really big mistake, or I've made a really big mistake. How many times have you felt guilty about that thing for like another 2 years? Yeah, it's really hard for us to forgive ourselves for what we've done. But the Prophet ﷺ was teaching him, going to Allah, asking for His forgiveness, making dua to Him is a means of you being forgiven and moving forward. This man found comfort in that moment in the masjid where he felt like there was nobody who could help him. He found his safe space with Allah through asking for His forgiveness and making dua. And Allah tells us in the Quran, there's so many times that He wants to forgive us and He wants to accept our repentance. So for example, this one verse, who I know somebody here is going to raise your hand and tell me, it tells us not to what? Because His forgiveness is so great. I'm hearing it whispered. Perfect! Despair! I'm like, despair! He's telling us not to despair. He says, oh, my servants who rob themselves, don't despair. Don't despair in the mercy of God. He forgives everything. He forgives everything when we come to Him asking Him for that forgiveness. In Surah Al-Furqan, Allah tells us, except for those who believe, who come back to Him, make tawbah and do righteous deeds, then He turns their bad deeds into good deeds. This is one of my favorite things in the world. This concept is if we make a mistake, just like this man made mistakes, and we come to Him and we ask for His forgiveness, on the day of judgment, those mistakes, when we've made tawbah, when we repented, are literally turned into good deeds, which means that this scroll of bad deeds that we see, this man comes on the day of judgment, he's like, did you do this, did you do this, did you do this? And so of course the man is like, yes, I did this, yes, I did this, yes, I did this. He can't deny it because if he does, his hands are going to speak on his behalf, his eyes are going to speak on his behalf. Literally, like there's nothing to get out of this situation. And he's so afraid of the bigger bad deeds that he's going to see. So after he's like, yes, I did this, it's told to him, your bad deeds have been replaced with good deeds. So now all these messed up things, he's like, yeah, I did that, oh, that was messed up. Now they're all good deeds. And he's like, but I did other bad things that aren't even in here. Because he wants all of those bad deeds to be turned to good deeds because of Allah's mercy. But why? Because he made Tawbah, he went back to Allah. He felt so bad for what he had done. He asked for Allah's forgiveness, and Allah not only forgave him, but he turned the bad into good. So all of those times where we feel like we can't let go of what we've done, like this man, the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell him, okay, now that you've stood up after saying it 3 times, I'd like you to spend the next 5 years feeling terrible what you've done. What he was teaching him is move forward. Find Allah as a refuge. Find him as your safe space. Come back to him, and then move forward. And that's exactly what we see in this next example of a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. So this companion was like, in their version of a mall, he's at the market, he's selling dates. This is in Muslim Imam Ahmed. And he sees a woman in the market, and she sees him, and they're kind of like checking each other out. And then he's like, I got better dates in my apartment. And then they go back to his apartment, and then they mess around for a little bit. And what happens? He feels horrible about what he's done. And he's like trying to get advice from people, like, you know, like when you spoke your book, he was like, you're like, who do I call about this situation? He was like a righteous person I can ask questions to, who won't judge me. So he goes to Umar radiallahu anhu and he asks him for advice. Then he goes to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And both of them are like, dude, like, ask this person. Abu Bakr's like, ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he goes to ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the response of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for kind of fixing this mistake doesn't even come from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It actually comes from Allah. He reveals the end of Surah Al-Hud, وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةِ. So establish prayer in the 2 parts of the different timings of the day and night. In the hasanat, yuhibna sayyi'at. The bad deeds, they wipe out the good. I mean, the good deeds wipe out the bad. Honestly, the opposite could happen, may God protect us. But Allah tells us, hopefully, I mean, He tells us to have hope, unlike what I just did. He's giving us hope that if we make a mistake, to do something good to fix it. So this man is like, whoa, if I pray, that's it? I'm forgiven? Is that just for me? Am I the only one who's forgiven because of this? And Umar was like, no, that's for the whole Ummah. And the Prophet was like Umar said, so the point is that, you know, when I make a mistake or when you make a mistake, I'm not suggesting you hook up after the conference and then just praise Lord. But the point is, when I do fall, when I do make a mistake, remember this companion who did too. And his like the medication for his soul wasn't, okay, don't go back to the masjid. It wasn't, don't pray anymore, Allah doesn't want to hear from you. It was, you made a mistake, go pray. Reconnect with him. He will be there to be your refuge when you make a mistake. And then move forward and try your best to continue to do good deeds. Let go of the guilt that's been holding you down and weighing you down this entire time. Use that pain instead to work righteous deeds to come closer to him, because the good wipes out the bad. Now, we talked about different methods of using these 47 tools of comfort, ways of helping our hearts be closer to Allah. How can I use these in a practical way? For the Quran, for example, for me, I read 5 pages a day in the translation. And those 5 pages a day in translation started to change my life. It wasn't only that I felt this hope in God. Sometimes we're taught to fear God, right? It's always like, taqwa means having fear of Allah. You fast in Ramadan so you have this fear of Allah. How many of you have heard that translated in that way? It's very fearful. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this fear is supposed to help us only be one side of that God. It's supposed to help us fear gaining His displeasure because we love Him so much. Our love for Him is so overwhelming. Our hearts are so focused on this love of Him that the last thing we want is for Him to be displeased with us. So that fear is only one aspect, and it's not fear Him because He's going to punish you. He's not out there to get you. He's not like this like bad villain out to be left. He didn't create you to punish you. And He says in the Quran, He talks about, why would I punish those who are grateful to me? So the point is that having this understanding of Allah as someone who loves you, wants to be there for you, is what I started to look at when I read the Quran in the translation. Reading it 5 pages a day in the translation is what started changing my life. For you, maybe if you don't read the Quran ever, maybe take one verse a day in English. Could you do that, time-wise? Yeah, you can even make it into a snack story. You can do whatever you want with it. But just pick one verse a day. Just one. You can be like, they don't want me to read Quran. So you know what I did? I read one page of Quran. Key to success. So, you just take one verse. And when you take that one verse, inshallah, over time, you're going to find that disgusting stuff in your heart where you feel like you don't even know how to explain it, it starts being filled with this light of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing is when istighfar or dua. So, dua is incredible because a lot of us don't know how to make it. Like, how many of you know someone, or maybe yourself, who's like, I don't really know how to make dua. I don't know how to talk to Allah. That's like really hard. Sometimes the way we're taught about talking to Allah is like, memorize this dua that's in this hadith and it's so wonderful. And that's true. It is so wonderful and so amazing. But dua is really about bringing your heart into this conversation with Allah. It's going into sujood and saying, oh Allah, I am heaven, what am I doing with my life? I am messing up. And I need you. I don't even know what I mean by what I'm saying, but I need you. You can make dua in English in your sujood. So going into this moment of privacy with God, just talking from your heart like, oh Allah, I'm really into this guy. And like, I don't really know what to do about it. And I know he likes me too. And I'm not really sure. Like, he is the one who should hear that because he can hook you up with what's good for you. But if it's not, he can give you something better. So the point is that whatever conversation you might be having with one of your friends, who better to have with than the ultimate friend who can actually help something come out of it or protect you from something that's not good for you, and who can help keep you strong on the straight path, inshallah. So that is dua and istighfar. The third thing is salah. If I'm somebody who prays all of my daily prayers on time, amazing. Inshallah, may Allah make all of us of those people. May Allah make all of us of those people who go to Firdaus al-A'la because of that. If you're holding on to that, awesome. What is one thing you can add? Maybe 2 rak'ahs every week of extra after Isha? What is one thing? If you don't pray, ever, this is your chance. Pick one salah, maybe one salah a week. Choose Tuesdays, Dhuhr time. Tuesdays, Dhuhr time, that's going to be my salah. I'm going to do it 4 times in this month. If I can get that down, next month I'm going to add another salah, inshallah. Work up to it, inshallah, until you're the people of the Muslimin who pray all the time. Who pray all the time. And why? Because when you do that, inshallah, the taste of this world is incredible because you're not only seeing with your own eyes and with your own hands, you have God with you. Like we said earlier, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you are with his knowledge and his seeing. The point is that one of his names is As-Salam, the peace. And he wants you to use your heart, to use this understanding of coming close to him, to work on this character with him, to attain peace in your own life. So call upon As-Salam, and inshallah, through that calling, we will all find that type of safe space, that type of peace with him. Can we get a call? So thank you, Ustadha Maryam. Okay, so for our second speaker for this session, we are having Ustadha Yasmin Mujahid. Ustadha Yasmin Mujahid received a BS in degree in psychology and a master's in journalism and mass communications from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After completing her graduate work, she taught Islamic studies and served as a youth coordinator. She also worked as a writing instructor at Cardinal University and a staff columnist at In Focus News. Currently, she is an instructor at Al-Maghrib Institute and a writer for the Huffington Post International, both internationally and locally. She focuses her work on spiritual and personal development. With that, I'd like to introduce Ustadha Yasmin Mujahid. Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So I feel like recently every time I start to talk, I have to say alhamdulillah for something I typically did not say alhamdulillah for, which is my voice. Because recently I've had this luck that when I'm about to give a full weekend seminar, I lose my voice.
speaking at RIS, and I was like, it was really interesting. But alhamdulillah, inshallah, you can hear me, I can hear myself, and I can talk, inshallah, clearly about a topic that is very, very important for me personally, and inshallah ta'ala, I hope to convince you of why it's important for all of us to focus on. And that is, it's a concept of using the Prophet ﷺ as an example, the Quran and the Sunnah as an example for how we can transform ourselves internally and why that's even important. So before I even begin to talk about transformation, before I begin to talk about essentially the heart, the whole concept of this whole conference, the theme of this conference, I think that before we begin a journey, we need to understand the importance of that discussion, right? So if I'm going to tell you something, I need to first convince you that it's important, right? And I need to explain to you why it's important and why it's something that you should focus on. So really quickly, I'm just going to talk briefly about the importance of the heart using what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in His Messenger. First of all, I want to tell you this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran, and this is on the tongue of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It's a very beautiful extended dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, in which he says, وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ, part of the dua, and do not disgrace me on the day when everyone is brought back. وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ, on the day when no wealth nor children will benefit anyone. This is important because we live in a world right now, we live in a culture, we live in a dunya where the things that seem to matter are things that have to do with wealth and power. And here children is an expression of power. And Allah is telling us that there's going to be a day when all of that isn't going to matter. Okay, so then that should lead us to the question of what is going to matter. Because we all want to be successful, right? Is there anyone in this room, or anyone alive for that matter, who says, when I grow up, I want to be a failure? Or, I need success. That's for someone else. It's not even something I want. Happiness. These are just natural human desires, yes? Yes? I like interaction. Yes? Awesome. Okay, so basically, yeah, this is really important, like interaction. So basically we all want the same stuff. So here it becomes important for us to listen, well, what is going to matter? We know what's not going to matter so far, right? يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ, the day when wealth and children won't matter, and it won't matter for anyone, it won't benefit anyone. So what is going to matter? He goes on to say, إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ, except for the one who comes back to Allah with a heart that is sound. With a qalb, heart, and the word qalb itself comes from the root which means to turn. It's something that turns. And the reason for this is because, subhanAllah, Arabic is a very precise language, and the heart, by its very nature, turns. And it turns easily, and it turns quickly. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually taught us through the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ used to repeat this dua very often. One of the most repeated du'as, or possibly the most repeated du'a, Ya muqallib al-qulub, O turner of hearts. Thabbit qalbi ala dinik, keep my heart firm on your deen. Because the heart, by its very nature, is something that turns. And you can be one way in the morning, and you can be a different way in the evening, or for, in an hour for that matter. The heart is a turning thing. And so the Prophet ﷺ used to ask for Allah to keep his heart firm, because it's something that by its very nature turns. So here we are told, on the tongue of Ibrahim ﷺ, in the Quran, that the only thing that's going to matter is the one who comes back to Allah. So after this whole journey that we're on right now, and this is just a moment, right? Of this whole journey, returns back to God with a heart that is healthy, with a heart that is sound. The word here, the phrase is qalbun salim. It's a healthy, sound heart. That's all that's going to matter. So that's number one. Okay, fair enough? Second, the Prophet ﷺ says in a sound hadith, after speaking about haram and halal, staying away from the haram, staying away from the doubtful matters, he goes on to say, Inna fil jasadi mudghah. Indeed, in the body there's a lump of flesh. إِذَا صَلَحَتْ, if it is set right, صَلَحَ جَسْدُ كُلُّهُ, the entire body will be set right. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ, and if it's corrupted, then the entire body, he says, وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ, then the entire body is corrupted. أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ, indeed it is the heart. What do we learn from this hadith? We learn that if we want to rectify the rest of our bodies,
If we want to rectify the rest of our lives, and then if we want to rectify the rest of the world, we need to rectify this lump of flesh. It begins with this lump of flesh. Whatever happens here, then happens here, then happens outward and outward. And it all starts with the hearts. It's the hearts of people that are, if they are set right, then your entire basically follows from that are your actions. Your actions come from because the master of the body is the heart. If you want to have sound action, you need to have a sound heart. And if you have a sick heart, you're going to have sick action following that sick heart. And when you have a sick heart, and then you have sick action, guess what you end up having? You have a sick world. And that's what we're dealing with. So it comes back to working here internally. Now in that work, we're going to get people who are going to be of the opinion, or the discussion will start, well, you know, my work is only in my heart. I'm spiritual but not religious. Now these types of phrases, things like I pray in my heart, I wear hijab in my heart, possibly fast in my heart. The idea here, and what's being said here, the understanding or the implication of these statements is that as if my actions don't affect my heart, and my heart doesn't affect my actions. The implication is as if they're separate. The implication is that I can have a certain type of heart and it doesn't show up in my actions. And that's untrue, because that goes directly in contradiction to the words of the Prophet ﷺ, who said, "Inna fil jasadi mudghah." In the body there's a lump of flesh. إِذَا صَلَحَ جَسْدُ كُلُّهُ. He says, if it is set right, the entire body is set right. You're going to see it in the actions. And if it's corrupted, you're also going to see it in the action. Therefore, there is a direct relationship between the heart and the action. From inward, outward. But guess what? It works the other way around as well. There's also a direct relationship between my actions and the condition of my heart. It also works from outward, inward. That's why we are not only taught purification of the heart through tazkiyah and remembrance, but we're also taught external work, right? We're told to struggle externally. We have a regimen of worship. We have a regimen of how we're supposed to act. So external and internal cannot be separated. And when you try to separate them, that means that we don't truly understand the relationship between the heart and the external. So that's why we have to really come back to balance. So much of our discussions, I think, have gone to extremes. We have people on one camp who talk all about the heart. And that's a very important discussion. Because as I said, I'm making the point to you of why it's an important discussion, right? But in that discussion of the heart, if we separate the heart from external struggle, if we separate the heart, working on the heart, right? From the externalization of the so-called love for God in our heart, the so-called spirituality, if it doesn't show up in our actions, then that means that there's something wrong internally. Because whatever is internal naturally shows up externally. That does not mean, so I don't want this to be misunderstood, that does not mean, if I have a sound heart, then I become an angel externally. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean that if I have a sound heart, that means I don't commit sins anymore. But what it means is that externally I am struggling in that path, that it does show up in some sense in my actions. And so we need to, again, I'm talking about these two different camps, right? You have this side of the discussion where it's like, let's talk about the heart, but don't talk to me about that whole external, like the actions. We want to separate. We don't want to talk about, we've become sometimes, on the other side, so focused on rules and regulations that, one extreme reacts to another. You guys know what I'm talking about? So a lot of times we come from maybe a background, and I will admit, a lot of us come from a background where it is a rule-oriented discussion. It's about haram and halal. You're taught about Islam, and Islam is simply a list of harams and halals, and that's it. right? So you can basically boil Islam down to a list. Do this, don't do that. And that's how we understand Islam, it's just rules. And so I think in reaction to that, that's one extreme. Because what that does is it focuses so much on the external and it doesn't look on the internal. We're not cultivating these sort of these integrated Islamic personalities. It's just a bunch of action, right? A person converts or reverts, and the first thing they're told is, all right, when are you going to change your name, right? Or, okay, now that you've converted, Valentine's Day is haram, right? No more birthdays. It's like the idea is that we have focused so much on these external things and we have neglected the internal in that camp, in that extreme. But there is another extreme, and I think we that other extreme of talking, let's just talk about spirituality. But that spirituality is not manifesting in our actions. That feel good, those feel good quotes, that make nice memes, what I'm talking about, that we like. Those quotes are not showing up in our actions, right? They're really cool, Ruby quotes, but they're, right? Yeah, you find them on my Facebook, but the point is that they're not being shown in our actions. It's not a struggle. It's not a manifested reality. It's kind of this theoretical feel good. And the whole point here is this. Islam came to transform us. Islam came not just with like cool quotes. Yes, there's a lot of cool quotes. But Islam, essentially the Quran, what did it come down to do? It did not just come down to be read, but it came down to transform. And that's exactly where we have to find that middle ground, where we are working on the heart in order to transform our actions. And when we transform the heart, yes, our actions do transform. And if they are not transforming, then that's an indication that the heart isn't changing. It's an indication there's a problem inside. It's like this hikmah. And I'm going to sort of paraphrase it. But what it says is that, what is the matter with you that you are standing and sitting and kneeling and prostrating? So you're doing these actions. You're staying up late, you're working hard on activism, doing all this work. But your heart hasn't moved from its place. And you haven't changed your habits. So what is this talking about? It's talking about where we may be doing, we may be working, but our actions our character is not becoming more beautiful. We're not actually manifesting these realities in our actions. When you see a person, and especially sometimes you see this among the newly practicing, or the very the newly religious kind of thing, right? In whatever capacity. And you see the way sometimes it manifests itself, sometimes, as okay, it shows up maybe in their dress, alhamdulillah. Maybe they change their name, you grow the beard. Okay, that's all good, because they're all saying this is wonderful. But then you see, for example, the way that they treat their family. And now they've actually become more harsh. Or they become more harsh with people around them, people in the masjid, people in the MSA. And this is their manifestation of religiosity. But that's in complete contradiction to the measure that the Prophet ﷺ gave us, isn't it? What did he say? He said, خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِهِ. For example, he said, the best of you are the best of their families. So he has just given us a criteria to gauge the heart that's external, isn't it? And it has to do with how we treat our families, and obviously those nearest to us. So he's saying that, he's basically telling us that when we are really religious and we're becoming and we're developing, we should become kinder with people, more compassionate with people, softer with people, and having more mercy, not the other way around. And if we're becoming more harsh or having ill manners with people, that's an indication not that I'm becoming more religious inside. It actually just may be an indication of my nafs deceiving me. Because sometimes when we think we're getting religious, we're just getting, unfortunately, a bit arrogant or self-righteous. So this integration between the heart and the action is extremely important. Now, before I wrap up, I want to give you guys practical tips, okay? Because obviously we hear a lot of theory. We hear a lot of theory, but I want to give you practical tips. And inshallah, I'm going to make it something easy to remember because you and I all know these principles when it comes to taking care of the body. I could bring, a 10-year-old in here, a 5-year-old in here, and ask them, how do you take care of your body? And they would know the answer. We all know this. So I'm going to ask you to think in the same way, all right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the body with certain needs. And similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heart and the soul with certain needs. All right, number one, we know that the body needs oxygen, yeah? Fair enough? Okay, no one really is nodding too much, but that's okay. I know you all know this. We need oxygen to stay alive. Now, what happens if I go without oxygen? Okay, you guys are so smart. Okay, good. We die. All right, awesome. So, guess what? The heart also needs oxygen. And I'm not talking about the physical heart, I'm talking about the spiritual heart, the one, the lump of flesh, remember? The physical heart, or the spiritual heart also needs oxygen. And the oxygen of the spiritual heart is the remembrance of God. Namely, number one, the salah, the prayer. Now, I am mentioning this because so often in our discussions about spirituality, we step over the essential and we want to know the fancy schmancies, Like, it's like a person who's goes to the doctor and says, doctor, give me a really fancy medicine. And the doctor says, how often do you breathe? And you say, I don't do that anymore. This is a silly example because it's not going to happen because you're not going to live to say anything. You're going to be dead. Feel me? Okay. So when we come and we're looking for fancy schmancy spirituality and we don't even have our salah down, then we're like that person going and saying, give me some fancy medicine and I don't even breathe. You know what I'm saying? Like teach me, train me, oh trainer, how to run a marathon. But no, oxygen, what's that? Well, I don't need that. No, that's for the little people. You know what I'm saying? That was no, I learned that in 5th grade. I'm past that. Give me something fancy. But you're not breathing. You're not even keeping your body alive. You're not getting anywhere, let alone running a marathon. You're not even going to walk across the street because you're not taking in the essential to keep your body alive. And that's the salah. And I cannot sit here and have a discussion with you. No one can have a discussion with you about spirituality without talking about the salah. Because the salah is the oxygen of your heart. And if your salah is not in order, and I'm just going to briefly say what that means. Either you're not praying all 5 prayers, or you're not praying on time. Simple as that. When you go to a doctor, and the doctor gives you medicine, and says, yo, you gotta take this medicine, you gotta take it 5 times, and you have to take it at certain times of the day, or it won't work, you're gonna do what the doctor says, right? Especially if it's cancer medication and you die otherwise. Fair enough? Because you and I are very, very interested and very, very concerned about keeping our body alive. Very concerned. But ironically, we aren't so concerned about keeping our heart and our soul alive. Now, I'm going to tell you briefly why that's tragic. What happens to our body in 100 years? Anyone? It's going to become essentially part of the dirt. Yeah? Anyone want to argue with that? Even an atheist cannot argue at that point. Yeah? But what happens to your soul, as you know and I know? It continues to exist. And it only moves from one realm to another. Fair enough? So here we have a body that is passing away, and we have a soul that is remaining. And which one do I take care of, and which one am I neglecting? That's tragic. Because I am very careful about keeping my body alive. If a doctor tells me, yo, you have cancer, and unless you take this medication, you're gonna die, I will take it on time, and I will take it exactly as it was prescribed. Yes or no? I absolutely will. And the proof, of course, of this is in Ramadan, when you wake up and you see the sunrise and you miss Fajr, it's the end of the world. Anyone want to tell me why? Because you missed Suhoor or Sahur. So for 1 month out of the year, it's the end of the world to miss Fajr because you missed a meal for your stomach. But then there's 11 months, and if you miss Fajr in those 11 months, Maybe you don't even notice. So you see our priorities here. Our priorities is that we're very, very concerned about feeding the body. Although that food is going to last a few seconds and then it's going to end up in the sewer. Whereas 2 rak'ahs, as the Prophet ﷺ said, two rak'ahs of prayer are worth more than everything in the heavens and earth. You get what I'm saying? I'm trying to put things into perspective. This is just the truth. Okay. So in order to keep our hearts alive, we have to oxygenate it through the salah and moreover the remembrance of God. Okay? That is your absolute essential, and it's the first thing you're asked about on the Day of Judgment. Whoever has their salah in order, as the hadith says, will have succeeded, and whoever does not will have failed. And it doesn't matter all the fancy things that you do. If your salah isn't there, you didn't have the oxygen, don't talk to me about running a marathon. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. So salah. Now, number 2, is you, in order to keep the body healthy, you need to clean it, right? So no one is going to say, I don't need to take a shower today because I did that last October. I'm good, right? The reason for that is that you know that perpetually dirt and sweat, you have to daily clean yourself, yeah? So the heart is the same way. The heart gets dirty. And the way that the heart gets dirty is through our sins. So we have to clean the heart, and we have to consistently clean it. And our cleansing of the heart is tawbah and istighfar, is repentance. And staying away as much as we can from sin. Alright? So we have to oxygenate the body, and that's through the remembrance of Allah. Now when I say remembrance of Allah, I said salah is first and foremost, but there's more under that umbrella, including the Quran, the connection to the Quran, and dua, and afkar, okay? Let me just say one thing about the afkar. I'm going to give you guys some advice, and if you follow this advice, it's going to go a long way in terms of taking care of your heart. If you guys take your phone and download an app for dua, a dua app, you might already have it on your phone, but there's countless dua apps. Don't do it right now, please. Just listen. Download a dua app, and every morning after you pray Fajr, open up the app and click on morning supplications. The afkar of morning. Morning supplication, and just read through them. If you don't read Arabic script, there's a transliteration. Read it in the transliteration and also understand the meaning, okay? And then after Asr prayer, open your app again and click on evening supplications and read through them. Believe me, you guys, this is no joke. This is some hardcore antidepressive, anti-anxiety, like anti-losing your mind medication. These are God, all right? And they are fortification from all these unseen, which there's lots of forces that are against us. Okay? Fair enough? That's all I'm going to say. Okay? Number three is before you sleep. Open up your app again and just click on the supplications for before you sleep. Everyone follow? Fair enough? I just gave you 3 very, very simple things. You may be like, oh, believe me, it is so powerful that it actually transforms the way you live your life. And you don't have to take my word for it, because this is something you can do yourself and find out. So we said the oxygen was the dhikr, number 1, salah, and the afkar, and the dua, and then number 2, and any kind of remembrance of God, of Quran, etc. Peace and blessings on the Prophet, I said, and that's all under the afkar. Number 2, afkar just means remembrance. Okay, number 2 was cleaning the body through repentance. Fair enough? Finally, number 3. Now, you might oxygenate your body, you might clean your body, but then every single day you go and you play in the dirt. You like to just roll around in the mud, just for fun. So what's going to happen to your very clean body? So you guys are never going to forget these analogies, even though they're ridiculous. You're going to get dirty, right? It doesn't matter that you're, yes, but I'm breathing, but I took a shower. Yeah, but you're playing in the dirt. You're playing in the mud, so you get dirty again, right? All right. This has to do with your environment. This has to do with what you're surrounding yourself with. Your company, your friends, what you're watching, what you're allowing into your eyeballs, and what you're allowing into your ears, and what you say with your tongue. These are openings to the heart. Okay? So when you put yourself in a dirty environment, it's just like playing in the mud. You're gonna get dirty. The heart is getting dirty because your company is poisonous to the heart. And so it affects you. You might say, oh, but I'm doing this and I'm doing this, oh, but I'm not doing what they're doing. The company itself affects the condition of your heart. And similarly, what you look at affects your heart. There's a reason the Prophet ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to lower our gaze. Guard your eyes, because the eyes are literally a gateway to the heart. Like in a literal spiritual sense. What you look at imprints into the heart. It's like you're at home and you don't want a robber to come in, right? But you leave your windows open, you leave your door, wide open, but you don't want the robber to come and steal your stuff. Well, you left the door open. Of course, you're the one letting him in, yeah? Same thing when you don't guard your eyes, when you don't guard your ears, and you don't guard your tongue, and you don't guard your company. You're leaving these doors wide open for all of this dirt to come in, for the shaitan, for the just poison to be poured into your heart. And that's why the heart becomes tainted, the heart becomes sick, and eventually the heart becomes dead. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it all easy for us, to build a heart that is sound, because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that's all that's going to matter. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Okay, Ustadha Maryam will be coming right back on stage just to make a quick announcement about ICE.
How many of you have heard of the Islamic Scholarship Foundation? Okay, many years ago, back when I was doing my master's, I wanted to apply for a scholarship, so I'm looking at their website in terms of who they had as scholarship recipients, so I could see what kind of person they were looking for. So I'm reading through, and I was at my parents' house, and I was like, oh my God, Mom and Dad, I'm never ever gonna get this scholarship. And they were like, of course you will, honey, you're amazing. You know what they say, right, kid? And then I was like, no, for real, every single person was open 5 businesses that are nonprofits, with state senators, 70 person. I was all these creepy things, and they were like, oh yeah, maybe not. That was supposed to be really good joke, but anyway. The point is that, alhamdulillah, they still gave it to me. They saw worth in who I was not, and they will see they will see your worth too, inshallah. My point is, don't not apply because you're intimidated. I was so intimidated, but alhamdulillah, I got it. And I'm making this announcement on their behalf. They're giving out so many thousands of dollars in scholarships for all of you, as long as you are a Muslim, enrolled in an accredited university, major in one of the fields, have a 3.0 GPA, and are a resident of the United States, and are an undergraduate student or a graduate student. So please go on the website. It's Islamic Scholarship Foundation, and their deadline is in March. And inshallah, you will not only get a scholarship, but then you can have a great story to tell today that nobody will laugh at. So,
Thank you for that. Also, a couple of reminders before we break off into workshop session 3. Ustadha Yasmin Mujahid recently published her own book, Reclaiming the Heart, and she will be doing a book signing as well as selling right outside those double doors. And during entertainment night, it will be in the packed lot. So throughout the weekend, you will have opportunities to both get to buy her book as well as get it signed, inshallah. Couple announcements. So how many of us got blessed with these little water bottles? We are limited on these, so please reuse them. Make sure that you fill up. There's water fountains around campus.